Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has called the recent talks between US and Russian officials unfair. This was because neither Ukraine nor Europe were made part of the talks in Saudi. In response, US President Donald Trump shifted the blame onto Ukraine, saying it should have made a deal earlier. Also during the meeting in Riyadh, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made it clear that Russia would not accept NATO peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. This had come as a proposal from the recent meeting of the European members of NATO. With these developments, the question remains, can the peace talks, which Trump claims to be more confident about, bring an end to the war that has lasted over 2 years? Joining us to discuss this ever-evolving discussion and topic, we're first joined by Dr. Sergei Dvoryanov, who is a Director of Communication at the BCMF BRICS Culture Media Forum, joining us from Moscow. We also have Raymond Vickery, who is a former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joining us from Washington. Also, we have Daniel Wagner, who is a CEO of Country Risk Solution, joining us from Portland, USA. We're also joined by Alexander Krayev, who is a Senior Lecturer at the Kyiv Mohyla Academy, an expert at Ukrainian Prism think tank, joining us from Kyiv. And finally, we are joined by Shyam Batra, who is an international affairs expert, joining us from London. Alexander, I'd like to start with you. And we have had a statement in recent minutes from Vladimir Putin, who says that Russia will allow Ukraine, and Donald Trump will allow Ukraine to be part of further discussions. Is this, do you think, a moment of optimism for Ukraine in the pursuit for peace?
That's definitely something we were waiting for, because basically no negotiation excluding one of the sides of the conflict is possible in this regard, because any negotiation excluding either Ukraine or Russia will be futile and will get nowhere, because if one of the sides of the full-fledged conflict, which is the Russian invasion into Ukraine, will not adhere to any part of the negotiated deal, the deal is broken, and then it's all about Trump being a false diplomat and Trump being not able to prove the deal as something successful. So basically, yeah, it was inevitable that both Ukraine and Russia will be included at the negotiating table. And all the talks after the meeting in Riyadh and all the talks after the meeting with Zelenskyy in the US several months ago were just Trump style of diplomacy. He speaks to Russians in a way Russians like him to hear, and he speaks to Ukrainians in a way Ukrainians like him to hear. So basically, it's something that Trump do. But eventually, if we speak about the negotiation per se, it's a negotiation between Russia and Ukraine, moderated possibly by the United States, with the inclusion of Europeans as a provider of security or weapons or whatever, because Trump also suggested that Europe must provide more for Ukraine, not the United States.
Dr. Dvoryanov, coming to you, we've had confirmation from Trump that Ukraine will be part of these talks, but do you think that Putin will allow European heads and European leaders to be part of these discussions as well?
Thank you for your question. You know the famous saying, the dog barks, the caravan moves on. Right now, process will already start with this process. And of course, this conflict between Russia and Ukraine was very well organized and prepared by previous administration of United States. And how we can expect that after Donald Trump came to the power, we can expect that the same government in Ukraine will exist and will continue all these very anti-human actions, because it was a conspiracy between previous administration of USA and all European politicians. They was a part of this conspiracy. And that's why, of course, I already told a lot of times that only I can see two real powerful decision makers on this process, which is Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. They will decide how we will move on this peacemaking dialogue. Regarding the European politicians, they already did a lot of mistakes against their own nations. Look to the economy of Europe. Look to the moods of the population. Everybody upset. That's why we can expect a change of elite, not only in Ukraine, but in all European countries as well.
Alexander, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to what Dr. Dvoryanov has said, and I'd also like to get your response to comments from Donald Trump, which imply that he sees potentially Ukraine as the people who are responsible for starting this war. What do you think to that?
Well, concerning something that Trump said, we see that Trump is still as unpredictable as ever. He can change his position whenever he likes. Several weeks ago, during his first round of signing the documents as the President of the United States, he said that it is Ukraine who have a more comprehensible approach towards peacemaking and negotiation. And he also said that Vladimir Putin is heading to a disaster. He has destroyed Russian economy, and he doesn't know what Putin really thinks. So Trump changes his mind. It's an axiom of international relations. That's something we should work with. And concerning the blame game of who started this war, well, unfortunately, Russians don't change. They never can take responsibility for their own actions. So there is nothing new here. But we all know who the aggressor state is. We all know who to blame for this conflict. It is definitely Vladimir Putin and Russian Federation as a whole. And there is nothing more to say here.
Raymond Vickery, I'd like to come to you and look at Zelensky's response that we've had today from the comments that have come from Donald Trump in recent hours. He said that Trump is trapped in a bubble of disinformation. Do you think that this is going to help him in getting US support from Trump, which he might need in these negotiations down the line?
Well, thanks very much for having me, Joshua. Of course, any criticism of Trump does not help you with him. He is an egomaniac who believes that he is, in fact, a very stable genius, as he said, and anybody who criticizes him is a victim of misinformation. And so, of course, that won't help. On the other hand, he's a very transactional guy. He's gotten criticism for his real estate deals, and in the end, he goes ahead and makes a deal that he thinks will suit him and increase his image. Right now, I believe that Donald Trump wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize. He sees himself as the great man. His comments actually in his press conference with Prime Minister Modi on the subject of peace were encouraging in that he saw the terrible consequences of war and indeed the terrible consequences if a war should become nuclear. So that's the good side. The bad side, of course, is that what Donald Trump's mindset is that he's basically rejected the lessons of World War II. He has said he's America first, and that harks back to a pre-World War II movement, which was very much in favor, really, of Hitler in some ways. I wanted to keep us out, even for those who maybe weren't in favor of the Nazi regime. And his rejection doesn't stop just at whether the United States ought to be involved in hostilities. It goes to the post-World War II institutions which have kept the peace for 80-some odd years, namely United Nations, NATO, IMF, World Bank, World Health Organization. All of those, in his view, are a mistake. And what needs to happen, in his view, is that great men, such as he views himself, and he would include perhaps Putin and Xi, and that can get together and make a deal that will suit his ends and win him laudits and prize. I do not believe that in the final analysis at work, the idea that Ukraine was responsible for war when everybody watched on television as Russia invaded and have seen that with their own eyes is simply a non-starter, but it is a part of the propaganda line that comes from Putin. And I would say not necessarily from the Russian people. I've been to Russia with Senator Fulbright. I've been to Moscow State University, and there are a lot of people who believe in human rights and democracy, but not and not this administration. So it's a very dicey time. We can only hope that the movement toward peace and now the belated inclusion of Zelensky and even European representation will produce not just a peace for today. You remember Neville Chamberlain went to Munich and he said, "I've come back with peace for our time." Well, less than a year later, we were involved in World War II. And we do not want to have a replay of that scenario. And so we hope that the movement toward peace for Trump will lead to something lasting and some semblance of respect for the rule of law, human rights, and the dignity of individuals.
Yes, Daniel Wagner, I'd like to come back to you and look at this relationship and the dialogue between Zelensky and Trump. Zelensky speaking about turning down a mineral deal with America because he couldn't sell his country, but in the same tone has also said that he needs to get security support. So is that support coming from the US? And if not, where is it coming from?
Well, the U.S. is the indispensable power at the end of the day, and I think Zelensky knows that. Zelensky had it absolutely right, by the way, when he said that Trump is in a disinformation bubble. That was being quite diplomatic, I thought. My view is he's in an alternative reality, and as other speakers have alluded, his decisions and his interpretation of facts change by the day or even by the hour. I think Zelensky understands that if for any reason the U.S. decides to completely bail on Ukraine, they're out of luck. I mean, this just isn't going to work. I think it's also a testament to the idea of common sense that Trump adheres to so vociferously, that Putin and Trump have finally come to the realization, which everyone else had come to quite some time ago, that Ukraine needs to be involved in this process. I don't know why it's such a revelation to them. Anyway, one of the one of the challenges is that the EU is not really in a position to defend Ukraine or to act as peacekeepers, because like the US and its 50 states, the EU and its 27 states can't really make up their mind on much of anything. And you know, H.R. McMaster said yesterday in London that the U.S. Marine Corps is larger than the British Army itself. So many of the European nations have basically said they're either not willing to make a decision right now on whether there will be EU troops, or that they're simply not going to send troops. So I think this is going to be a very, very difficult nut to crack.
Yes, and Shyam Batra, coming to you, thank you for your patience. Looking at potential European support to Ukraine, how will that look? Obviously, Keir Starmer has said that he's willing to move troops, but on the flip side, Olaf Scholz has questioned sending troops to Ukraine. So is there a real stalemate going on here with top European leaders, and how do they iron those out to protect themselves also above Ukraine potentially?
Hi, Sean Batra. Thank you, Joshua, for your question. I want to start off by saying that I think there are too many chefs in the kitchen right now. This deal should have been fixated with Zelensky and Putin. And it should be, and I want to talk on more of a diplomatic point of view. I don't have any allegiance with anyone. I know I live in England, but what I think what our Prime Minister is doing, handing over money to Ukraine, which we have done for many, many years. Our own country is in a complete mess doing this. And I think countries that have their own problems need to deal with them first. But with the advent of Europe coming involved and other countries, etc., it kind of, I think what's happening right now in the world is that these guys who are all presidents and prime ministers, they just don't do common sense. Where is the common sense out of this? We want the war to be stopped. It's not about winning a Nobel Peace Prize. I was ex-mayoral candidate of London. I still took off 49 people off the streets of London, got them a home, got them money, got them an iPad, got them on their feet. Why is it that this is such a difficult game to play? There is a war going on. There is money being changed hands. There are troops being killed with no body armor and nothing else. And then we've got Europe putting their foot in. Well, if Europe really wants to assist in the matter, then they should come to the table, make a resolution, make an agreement, make a system, and present it. But talking about all of this is just words. There are no actions. We need actions. We need to get Zelenskyy to the table with Putin. And I think a small amount of his team and a small amount of Putin's team should be able to knock this into a right place. Because bringing in Trump, bringing in this, bringing in that, there is no common sense being portrayed. We need real common sense to end this war. If we don't use diplomacy, which I always believe is better to be diplomatic and try and fix the problem before punching each other. I was first Indian boxing promoter, so I know a bit about boxing. But to come back to your question, it's just like it needs to be repaired. And I know the solution. If I'm allowed to come in and help negotiations, I know the solution, and I think I can open it up and make it work. It's just a paper exercise that needs to be done. People need to communicate. And at the end of the day, communication is not being played.
No, Dr. Dvoryanov, looking at comments that have come from Sergei Lavrov, he's spoken about the position and issues that the Biden administration placed Russian and US relations in. Do you think that this is a new sort of era and a new generation for US-Russian diplomatic ties? And how important will that be in, like Shyam says there, in resolving these issues and making sure those conversations that need to be had do get had?
Yes, of course, obviously, it's a new era. We're coming to the golden age of humanity. Mr. Shambatar, my lovely brother from UK, he mentions that he knows the solution. Of course, we have only one opportunity to save the world, only one solution. It should be a new generation of new politicians in Europe, in all Western countries. They will come to power to start to create such kind of real dialogue of civilizations where all of us, like human beings, be a part of one family, of one God. We need global thinkers. We need some global decision makers who can really be responsible for the future of our planet. Because I already mentioned that European politicians, unfortunately, they was involved in some kind of conspiracy against our country. It was very painful because our national leader, Vladimir Putin, a lot of times he trusts to their promises. And again, it was like a trap to our national leader. But thanks God, I'm a believer. I can see that right now, who appoint Donald Trump? It's not the Republic Party of USA. God himself appointed him to be a president of USA to change all the policy. Because right now, if will be increase this conflict, it will be dangerous challenger for all of us, all humanity. That's why we can see that not only Donald Trump, all his team, they're doing well. Elon Musk doing well, Vice President of USA, they're doing very well to start a real human dialogue, which is based on universal moral principles. This is most important. Of course, and that's why our Minister Sergei Lavrov, he was very happy after the conversation. See, all of them, they smile, they was very relaxable, because right now we can see that we will not increase war anymore. We realize that we are human beings and we can be a part of one family, of one God and one civilization.
Dr. Dvoryanov, very quickly, just to jump off the back of what you said, is there a possibility that Trump has just said what he needs to say to Russian officials to get them to do what he wants?
Please kindly, can you repeat what
Yeah.
are the possibilities?
Yes, I'm asking if there's a possibility that Donald Trump is just saying to Russian officials what he needs to in a transactional manner to get what he wants and what he thinks needs to be done out of the situation.
You see, I'm an optimistic man. I'm looking to the future with a real optimism, because I can tell you why. Because right now we can see that we have some common vision between our national leaders. And if we will have any obstacles or any difficulties during this peacemaking dialogue, of course, we'll definitely find the solution, we'll find a decision how to make it happen. And my opinion that right now we start only, it's only first step. Second step, of course, is a personal meeting of to our leaders. All right now, all politicians are expecting and very much eager to see how it will going on. We're in the process, and all this process in the hands of God. I completely believe that it was created by God himself and is a gift to humanity.
Alexander, looking at the response from US officials saying that Kellogg will travel to Kyiv and speak with Ukrainian officials and they will listen, do you think this is something that is going to happen? And if so, what will Zelensky and his officials be telling the US that they need for any peace deal?
Well, basically, first and foremost, no peace deal is achievable without any security guarantees. We do understand that Russia will not change, unfortunately. Russia will not change its political regime, its strategic culture. Russia will not change its approaches towards its neighbors. Russia is still remaining an imperialistic worldview power as it is right now, as it was for much part of its history, unfortunately for everybody, even the Russians themselves. So basically, point number one is security guarantees, either NATO or something similar, or some pathway to a strategic partnership that will provide for non-repetition of Russian aggressions against Ukraine or any other neighbor. That's part one. Part two is, of course, the enhanced economic and social partnership that was established in 2020 with the Charter of Strategic Relations being signed between Washington and Kiev. Part number two is, of course, inclusion of European powers, and I do agree with my colleagues that Europeans are still quite messy with their geopolitics and with their security policies, but at least we see the five European states that are ready to do more. It's Poland, it's France, it's a lot of the Baltic states, it's of course Northern Europe who are ready to do more, who are ready to stop any violation of international law, any further aggression. So basically we do understand that the unity of European continent, unity of NATO, and the unity of our partner states is the only chance for us to withstand any further aggression on the part of Russian Federation. And that's point number three. So basically, it's not about trying to achieve something unachievable. It's just laying the groundwork for the possible negotiation. It was Zelensky nearly 8 months ago who said that we are ready to negotiate, but negotiations should be fair. The negotiations should start from the position of force. If Russia is to claim anything, or if Russia is to blame anybody on what is going on, then negotiations are a failure from the start, and they will be a failure first and foremost for Ukraine and our allies, and that is the United States. Because I do truly believe that China is watching this spectacle of geopolitics right now, and they're waiting for their chance to use any kind of strategic weaknesses or indecisiveness of the United States to their advantage. So basically, the US is in no position to let Ukraine fail at this negotiation because it will provide for basically a domino theory, the same that was used during the Cold War, but in relation with China.
Daniel Wagner, we're very close to finishing, just in a minute or so. I'd like to look at the role of Donald Trump in these discussions and the geopolitical impact. What's next for Trump and what's next for this peace deal?
Right, so there's a movement on in the States right now among the media to basically ignore Trump and see what that might do to him and his psyche and his leadership. I think Trump has positioned himself as an essential player in this whole opera going on, and that's not going to change. The Europeans are squabbling too much among themselves for that to change, and of course the détente that is going on now between the US and Russia is too important to ignore. I think what all the players need to keep in mind is that where we are today is not likely to be where we end up. And if we keep that in mind and keep an open mind and include the European countries, of course, essentially Ukraine, then maybe there's a chance this will work. But if we simply rely on Trump and his whims, we're not going to see the light of day.
Thank you very much to all of our guests for that extremely insightful discussion. As these talks continue to evolve, we will of course bring you all of the updates from Russia, Ukraine, the US and across the world.